Morning, everybody. This is Gil. I hope you're all having a nice long weekend. I don't know if anybody's working today. I know I'm not, but then I guess I'm never working, even though I'm working. In any case, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about probably the part of the whole investing process that gets my blood boiling, which is basically the treasure hunt, the hunt for winning stocks and how you find them in any particular market environment. And what I do on a daily basis to find names, as well as give you some options depending on what your budget is, on ways that you can do the same thing. So I'm assuming everybody can hear me fine. But basically, my process has evolved. I used to focus on using O'Neill tools, basically Wanda, which is William O'Neill Direct Access. That's the institutional platform. But because they're very bizarre about whether you can use their charts on websites or presentations or whatnot, I guess their policy is if you're not making money or charging to put their charts up on your website or your webinars, that's not okay, but if you aren't, that's okay. It seems to me that someone who's providing it free on a website or a webinar is really a competitor to their services, but I don't see how allowing people to use and show your products hurts you. And so I gravitated towards HGS Investor mainly because they were more than willing, along with other firms like eSignal, StockCharts.com, more than willing to allow us to use their charts on our websites in presentations that we did either at the Money Show or online, as well as articles we wrote, and most importantly in our books. So starting to use it, I began to realize that this is a very strong tool for me, and it's actually replaced my usage of O'Neill products for the most part. I still have a Wanda. I just pay for it out of respect to the organization, and there are a couple of useful features on it, but I could replace it all with other platforms. So all that is to say is that there are options for you out there in terms of finding lower cost ways to screen the market, to find new stock ideas, and to monitor them in real time. But in any case, my main squeeze, my main tool these days is the HGS Investor software, which you can see here. I've got, this is a starting bar, whatever you want to call it, icon bar, whatever, that you start with. And I start every day. You update this system after hours, so it gives you a couple hours after the market closes to go do something else, go for a jog, go for a workout, whatever it is you want to do, and then come back and update. And to me, this is actually the most exciting part of my day, and I get pretty hyped up for it because this is a treasure hunt. This is where you find the stocks that are hopefully going to start some moves. And over the last couple of weeks, I found several stocks that have had some very sharp upside moves, have been very rewarding. And I would have to say that in most cases, they are not meeting the standard O'Neill criteria, and so you're not going to find them there on those particular tools. You need to find them on other tools. I also think the markets have changed a bit in that looking backwards in terms of 3 to 4 quarters ago of earnings, the last 8 quarters of earnings, accelerating this. I mean, everybody sees that. Everybody knows that. There's so much data out there that it's pretty well known by the crowd. You know that a company is showing big earnings growth over the last 5 quarters. That's not a big secret. And I think a lot of the market has become more forward-looking, and I think you're seeing that in a lot of winning stocks. I'll give you a couple examples last year, and those of you who were on the VOSI chat room, you remember that I was talking about Tesla in the 40s and Solar City under 20. Why? Because they kept showing up every day on this particular screen. Hopefully the resolution works here. I'm recording this on a couple of different recording platforms, and we'll check out the resolution. We're trying to improve that for the webinars in general. But every day I look at this basic list. HDSI has a lot of built-in lists. You can see here 52 EI reach rate. Just go down the list. ERG 240. ERG is like a composite rating. It's a combination of the EPS, the RS, and the group. And I think group is important because a lot of times you'll see groups moving that don't necessarily fit O'Neill characteristics or Can Slim type characteristics. But the fact that they've got either a strong relative strength, maybe a moderate EPS ranking, and a very strong group movement, which I think is very key in finding winning stocks, the ERG rating is useful, and it can replace the composite rating in terms of finding winning stocks. But you can see my main list is stocks and groups moving to the upside. I look at this every day, and this is 01/17. So this is as of the end of Friday. So I come up with this list. The first thing I do is I sort it by ERG, and you just do that by clicking on top. And so the highest stocks are shown at the top. And you can see this one, for example, Puma Biotechnology, 99, 99, 98 straight across in the Biotech group, which is a strong group. And there's another interesting thing, which is you can do a spectrum analysis thing. So here, this is the value here. I'm looking at industry price change. Yeah, I guess I'm not doing this right. I'll have to check with Ron on this. But you can mess around with that, and you get a sense of which stocks or which groups are leading. I don't really find that to be relevant on a day-to-day basis. I'm looking at what are the stocks that are moving on any given day, and then I simply screen through them. So I double-click on the first stock, Puma Biotechnology, and give it a little time to come up. And there we go. So we come up with a daily chart. Whoops. Kind of blow that up, make it nice and big. So you can see Puma Biotechnology was actually hitting my radar screen back in here after it had a Bible gap up and then was forming a flag, and everything's flashing blue along the top. I like these indicators because I'm very visual in my approach to the market. I don't know, a lot of people strike me as being very quantitatively oriented. They're looking for some magic formula, y equals x squared plus 2x minus 23, and put it all into a nice, neat little formula. And I just brought that formula up because my kids are doing algebra right now, and I've been helping them with it. So that's kind of in my head. But formula. Somebody's looking for a formula. They want to plug in some variables that they can quantify somewhere, and then throw them, throw them into the algorithm or the equation and have it spit out an answer, and it's very concrete. And people approach the market that way. That's not my approach. My approach is very visual, and it's based on looking at a lot of charts. So I'm looking for ways that I can look at a lot of charts very quickly, and I'm looking also with an eye towards not adhering to some sort of group think. I'm always thinking, like, what does the crowd see here? What are they afraid of? What are they greedy about? Is there an opportunity here based on that, or what the rest of the market isn't seeing? And so this comes back to the idea of looking back 3 to 4 quarters at earnings and return on equity is this and that and everything, and that's all nice and well and good. But I think in this market, to get an advantage, you need to be thinking a little bit ahead of the crowd, and I think this tool allows me to do that. So what I'm basically doing, we're going to look at this list. So I would be doing this after Friday. Usually for me this might be Friday afternoon or maybe Saturday morning, but we're just popping through it, and so I want to go through my list with you and give you an idea of what I'm looking for on a daily basis. And so as we go through, hopefully these things don't take too long to load. I don't know. You can see Ligand Pharmaceuticals. This one actually showed up in here, and I think on the VOSI website we did put out a pocket pivot buy point alert here, but you can see how it suddenly is flashing blue all of a sudden here. I saw the pocket pivot. That looked pretty good back then. Cadence Pharmaceutical, this one is actually holding nice and tight. You can see that looks pretty decent. It looks like it wants to go higher, but it's an $11 stock. Jazz Pharmaceuticals, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but I think back in 2010 is when we were first picking up this stock at about $10, and the stock has continued to go higher, hitting a new high on Friday at 150.02. So you can see this one's been flashing nice and blue for a while. Notice here, though, on this breakout where you see the bongos and the force index, and I use these indicators. Kahunas are when I see this turn dark blue and all of these are blue, that's generally a good sign. This took a little while to get going, but you get a little pocket pivot here, and bingo, you're off to the races on another decent upside move. So let's see, Intercept Pharmaceuticals. This one's a little bit crazy. I don't really like that kind of volatility up over 480 down to 280. I don't really like that. If I want something like that, I'll invest in Nu Skin. Alexion has been a strong stock, but it's also very volatile. And you sort of see that in the pattern here because you see this red showing up. So I like to see a little more consistency. But you can see that it's been strong, and here was a buy point right here. This is actually a breakout. This was the first breakout it stalled, and then this is a pocket pivot. I think we put an alert out there, but you can see this one looks fine. It's extended now, so I'm not really interested in this right now, but there was a time to be. AOL, this is a name that probably would not show up in your CanSlim screens because you had a pocket pivot right here on a flag breakout, and it slows down a bit the next day, but you close in the upper half. Things are starting to flash blue right there. I thought this was a buy right there, and it's a nice trade pop into the upside there. Now it's extended, but a few days ago I saw this one, and I thought it looked pretty good. Quest for Core Pharmaceuticals is one that flashed a pocket pivot, but you can see that it was starting to turn in here. This is a special chart view that I have called my secret weapon bar chart, and it shows these gray areas are oversold. It's an oversold indicator. Now you're going to notice that a lot of the stocks I look at it's going to look like this thing calls a bottom every time, but not really. I mean, here it's showing a low, but the thing does round a little bit and then rolls over again. But it's when I see these in combination with some constructive action coming up the right side, I think this looks okay, and I think on the pullback one might consider buying it. The only problem here is if we click up here, this is one thing I really like about this. It says earnings due up here 225, so they got another month or so before they're going to announce earnings. But this is coming into the 50-day. If it pulled into the 50-day, I might be interested in here. It's sort of a 50% retracement, but you can see things are flashing blue here. Someone's asking about the bongo, what that means. You'll have to go onto HGS investor websites, or actually go onto their website and look at the definition. But it's just an indicator that I started playing with, and I noticed that Ian Woodward, who is one of the brains behind HGS Investor, I think Ian's 82 now, so he's got a guy with a lot of experience in the markets. Came up with this. I think it's based on Bollinger Bands. I'm not sure. But I don't care, because what I do is I look at all these indicators, and at one point I had 20 bands on my chart view, and after a while I sort of pulled out what I thought was most relevant and would give me an advantage, and so far this seems to be the ticket. Now this one's interesting, this Wuxi Pharmaceuticals. Notice that it's I think it's a thin stock. It trades 659,000 shares a day, so that's not too bad. But it's holding in pretty tight here. You get a little bit above average volume on the pullback, but it is holding in pretty decently. Let's do something here. What I like about this, you can new HGS charting window. So let's go to a weekly chart. Whoops, what happened here? I should have a weekly chart on here. Whoops. Yeah, I'm really goofing it up. Uh-oh. The dreaded Windows circle. Yeah, here we go. I want to get the similar WX, so I'll type that in here. You can see you got support. There's some pretty nice supporting action on the weekly chart, and you notice you got some support off the 10-week line here, which is the blue line, and you got supporting weeks here. So it's actually acting pretty well. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw this one pop out of here. So it's one to keep an eye on. It's probably not marginable, so because it's probably a smaller Chinese name, but that looks pretty decent. Kahunas, people are asking about these indicators, but I don't really want to waste time defining them. The kahunas are just price and volume signals that are generated, and like I said, I'm not really so concerned with the definition of the indicator. Force indexes are something from Dr. I guess Larry Elder, who's written a couple of books, and they turned this into and you can actually do this in a variety of ways, but I turn it into a colored bars because I like to see the colors lining up. But you can get this, if you subscribe to HGS Investor, you can get this secret weapon bar chart and it'll be all set up for you without having to worry about it. I'm mainly looking at the patterns of the colors here. So anyways, so that stock is going to go on my watch list for tomorrow, for Tuesday. Illumina is, this has been acting very well. Notice how everything has been blue. The daily force, the 2-day force index is a short-term indicator, but when you see a stock very tight and very flat and everything starts to flash blue at once, a lot of times that'll be telling me it's time to pop in. Notice here you had back in, I guess, middle of November, towards the end of November, you had a nice signal there. And it's actually picking it up in the base while it's still sitting along the 20-day moving average, which is the green exponential moving average here. So in terms of learning the HGS platform, the tutorials they offer are great. And Ron is always there to help people out. Ron Brown, if you email in, he's more than happy to help you out in figuring out what you want to do on the system. So, but Illumina's, flashing. I don't know. We talked about this in the Friday webinar, or was it Thursday? I forget now. It was Friday, and not sure whether this is a viable gap up. To me, it's not, and I probably wouldn't mess with it here. But you can see you had signals long before. In fact, you notice how you get in this kahuna, and this occurs right in here. When it gets real tight, your volume's drying up, and you start to see these things pop up like that, because you can see this, line it up here. You can see where this got very constructive, and you could have probably just bought the stock there. I'm guessing, though, this was on earnings, and in that case, you're playing earnings roulette, but it's interesting to see strength in the stock going into the earnings report. Bit Auto, this one looks okay. This is a breakout from a base. You can see that you got the kahuna here. I guess the earnings come out on March 6th, and you can see it's flashing blue, but this place to buy probably is on a pullback towards the 10-day moving average. This one looks interesting. It's a very thin stock, though. It does trade $1.3 million, but it's pretty price point thin. In other words, it's going to swing around a little bit. But I like this as well. This looks okay based on what I'm seeing here. CalAmp, kind of a thin stock, but it's extended, so I just kind of push right through that. Basically what I'm doing is going through these real fast, and you can see gas log. This is kind of interesting. Where have you heard about this name? You won't read about it in IBD or sticking to Can Slim type parameters, which to me are backwards looking. And that's not to say it's a bad system. I think in a good market, like 1999, you can pretty much pick anything with a 90 EPS relative strength, and you would have made a lot of money. I think these markets are a little more difficult because Can Slim parameters were not picking up Tesla down in the 40s or the 60s. They didn't get hot for it until it was forming a high tide flag around 90. It also never picked up Solar City. Also would have never picked up GoGo. Also would have never picked up Yelp down closer to the 40 level, I believe, 50 level. Solar City running up and getting a little bit tired. But you can see how it was showing strength in here when it got tight, and we saw a couple of pocket pivots in here, so we liked it, but nothing doing there now. What I'm trying to do is go through this and look at what we might be interested in for Tuesday. And so far, we're looking at WX and BITA, but I like BITA, BITA, Bit Auto on a pullback. Melco Entertainment, notice here it's in the base and everything starts turning blue. And right about here it starts coming out and it's moving, and then you have a pocket pivot here, a pocket pivot breakout, which isn't sufficient volume for a standard O'Neill breakout, but it is sufficient for a pocket pivot breakout. It has continued higher. But you see this tightness in here, and then you start to see everything flash blue. When I see that, a lot of times I'll jump into a stock, and I'll jump in heavy. And that's worked very well in terms of dealing with stocks like YY, for example. It's been very strong. Solar City worked pretty well that way too. MGM Resorts, this is been moving along with the gambling stocks. Las Vegas Sands, you've seen Wynn also going bonkers to the upside. But look at this move. I mean, just very steady to the upside. Nothing here. It's Xilium Pharmaceuticals. But notice, I mean, this is an interesting name. It's very powerful. What's going on here? Is there something? Trades 1 million shares a day, so it's not, you know, that tiny, but it's relatively thin. But this, you know, will lead you to a name. You can go and research it more and go online and understand what they're doing, what sort of drugs they're developing. Workday, you know, you saw Workday down in here get nice and blue, and then in here before it broke out. As it broke out, you saw everything turn nice and blue, and it's run up since then. Probably needs to catch up to the 10-day, but not interested in it right now as a new buy. Angie's List. Now, this is interesting because Angie's List has been a dog for a while. Now, it's trying to round out. It's come down, and to me, it doesn't. I don't think it's really going to get there yet. You're seeing a lot of stalling in the pattern, but notice how it is starting to show some signs of life off the lows, and you can see these oversold indicators. We're trying to pick off a low every time, but hasn't really happened. I don't know, maybe this is the thickest one. Maybe that means this is the low for the stock. But if you look at it on a weekly chart, it's starting to look like this. You're closing in the upper ranges, and you've got a pickup in volume here. So, you know, maybe it's starting to round out, but I think it's pretty deep in there and not something I would really want to mess with right now. Valiant Pharmaceuticals. Moving higher, and you can see everything starting to turn blue in here as it's getting very tight in here. So a little shakeout here and then went higher. But still nothing I'm looking at right now. Not sure why this is coming up. I'm going to get rid of it. Actavis, nothing there really. Starting to turn blue, but nothing set up in terms of the 10-day being close to the price. Biogen. Excuse me. Notice Biogen after this crazy move up, straight up off the lows of the base. This also coincided, it came right off the 10-week line. And you try to break out and you fail. Well, now you're holding in very tight. Everything's turning blue. These stocks, I think Biogen and Celgene is the other one, are going to be announcing earnings this week. And they look constructive going into the announcement. I'm going to guess that this is going to go higher after earnings. That's my guess. So some other questions. The blue bar stuff is preset, or does the user need to set it himself? Well, if you use this system, you can use my chart view, and it'll be set up automatically for you. A couple other questions I'm just going to answer. If the Bongo Weekly and the Force Index 13 DMA are blue, might that help keep you in a trade longer? Yes and no. When it's blue in the longer term, the 13 DMA and the Bongo Weekly are still blue. Sometimes even the Bongo Daily, which doesn't change very quickly, is remaining blue, and you've got a stock pulling back like here on this Rite Aid, which is, you know, cheap stock, and you've got a couple of red bars on the 2-day Force Index, and this is remaining blue. Yeah, that can tell you a lot of times that the pullback is normal and might even be viable if it's coming into an area of support. In this case, this came down to the 50-day, and it was. And nothing there. Some other questions. With lots of attractive-looking buy candidates, how many stocks do you trade at one time? Do you prefer to go in big on 1 or 2 names, or do you trade 4 to 5 names simultaneously? It all kind of depends. My preferred way to do it is 2 or 3 names big, and come in and hit the moves, and then bail out, get 20, 25, 30% hopefully, and bail out, and then move to something else. And this market has been fairly rotational, so it's allowed you to do it. That's what allowed me to do very well last year. I'd like to see the market get back to a mode where I can buy a couple, 3 names and just sit. In 2004, which was the last year I had a big year on the upside, I just had Google and Apple, and I held them pretty much the whole way during the last 3-4 months of the year, and I was up 168% that year. So yeah, I would like to see that happen. Now, InventSense is looking interesting here. You notice that you've got this gap up, viable gap up move. Everybody's talking about InventSense. There's a lot of talk about Google having wearable technology, and they're moving that way. Apple's moving that way. Samsung already has some of that. And there is talk that InventSense is going to benefit from this. Now, they're coming out with earnings on next week. So in fact, it's going to be Wednesday, I believe. Yeah, and so you'll get a chance to see what happens there. But there is a lot of talk about this, and I think conceptually, thematically, whatever you want to call it, the big picture is that they may benefit. The only problem I have with InventSense is if you look at the estimates going forward, there's a minus 29.41% here. If you look at first call estimates, I think it's minus 28%. So they're looking at negative earnings growth going forward, and that I find that a little troubling, given that I would rather see them turn things around. They've been decelerating. You can see here earnings have been decelerating, sales have been decelerating. They need something big, and I don't think it's going to happen on the earnings announcement. So we'll see what happens. I'm not really interested in buying the stock and playing earnings roulette. Maybe I'll buy 1,000 shares. That way, if it goes, the most I can lose there is $21,000, which is not a big deal, at least to me. So, you could buy 100 shares and see what happens. But you'll notice it is sort of setting up here and starting to look a little bit better. I never was really into the Bible gap up here. It's kind of low in the pattern. It's very erratic and choppy. But you could see that's one to keep an eye on. So I put that on my watch list, because you see what happens after earnings. Maybe it gets a Bible gap up. And then maybe it has a move like FireEye. These stocks, Allergan, Valley is moving higher. The whole group has been moving higher. But you can see here, when it broke out, everything turned blue, and that was pretty much a buy point. It's been pretty slow to the upside. Generally, if I buy something like this, it runs up a little bit and doesn't go anywhere, I'll bail out. Valley is also an old name, so I think among the gambling stocks, I like the actual resort companies like like the MPEL, LVS, and Wins as well. So Synaptics, remember we caught this one on a pocket pivot right here. It's moved higher ever since, but that was a very strong move. And you can see the stock was flashing some strength within the base, but it's still a little bit spotty. I think it wasn't until you got this move that things became much more pronounced on the upside. Hertz is pulling back, so this is one. I know the chart's not up, but I know what it looks like. But you're seeing it's coming down to the 20-day moving average. It's basically dropping below this Bible gap-up move. You ran into resistance up around here. But the travel industry has been doing better. Priceline is hanging in there. I noticed Trip has been trying to turn, TripAdvisor, and it's trying to turn here. If you're the type who likes to buy on pullbacks and you're not afraid of testing a pullback to the moving average using a quick stop, maybe Hertz turns. But to me, it's kind of an old, boring name. Multimedia Games is looking pretty good here. You see you have a roundabout sort of formation. See the bottom was picked off by these indicators here. We got a couple of them. But in general, I like to see this coincide with more constructive action. If I see things rounding out, you got a pocket pivot here, nice and slow. You see that right in there, and you get all this turning blue here. The weekly bongos finally turned blue here, so maybe this thing's got some upside momentum. Earnings come out, though, on January 30th. And that's an interesting Bible gap-up move, and it may be trying to round out a new base. Skyworks, this one had a Bible gap-up on Friday. Notice it closed at the low end of the range. A little feeble going into that, but it looks to me like if you wanted to come in and buy this one, you could put this on your list for tomorrow. If it holds roughly the low, which I think on this day was 30.27, closed at 30.53, so you got a pretty tight stop there. You might add another 2 or 3%. Maybe this is Bible here. It had another Bible gap up down here, but never went anywhere. Someone asks, does HDSI provide any intraday updates? No, they don't, but you can marry this or use it in conjunction with Thinkorswim for intraday stuff. And the other thing I do is, and I'm going to get to that in just a bit, you can marry it to stockcharts.com and use stockcharts.com as a way to monitor stocks in real time, because stockcharts.com does update their charts in real time. Trinity Industries looking pretty good here. Notice how when you pull back to the 20-day, the next day you kind of pick up, everything flashes blue right along this line here, called my line of sight. And that could have been bought there right off the 10-day, looks like to me, and it's moved higher ever since. A little extended now. This one's interesting, Acadia Healthcare. I keep seeing this one pop up. Not sure if the fundamentals are all that high. Yeah, they're not too bad. And this one has, after this big break, it has moved higher. But you might notice this is probably your big, strong signal down here. and the stock's kind of extended, so not really something I'd be looking at buying right now. I'm looking for the next wave of setups, really, is what I'm looking at. SunPower, you can see that when you had this breakout, everything started to turn blue except the Bongo Weekly, which now everything is blue. But this wasn't that powerful of a move because the kahuna is turning a lighter blue color. Okay, I don't know why. I'm not going to give you the quantitative aspect. All I know is I associate patterns with these colors, and when they all look a certain way, to me, that's when I'm coming in to buy them, and that's how I operate. I'm not a quant guy. I don't think in terms of percentages of this or that. I get a lot of questions. Well, what percentages of stocks showing XYZ will have upside moves after earnings? It's like I could really give a flying whatever. But in any case, you just know that I operate on a visual basis, and that's how I have always operated and always will operate. And as well, I employ a certain thematic approach in terms of trying to do big think sort of things and understanding where institutions are going to have to be. That's one of the reasons why I had a big year in 2001, aside from being short into 9/11, something I'm not necessarily proud of outside of the fact that it was definitely the right time to be short. But getting long a stock like Lockheed, which continued to move higher after September of 2001, right into April, May, I believe, of 2002, even when the market topped out in January of 2002, early January. And that was not a canceling stock, but I understood what I was seeing on the chart. I understood a sort of thematic basis for it. Somebody asks, is HDSI your primary source for new ideas, or do you use HDSI to confirm pocket pivots and other patterns you find elsewhere? HDSI is my primary source for ideas, and this list is my primary source for ideas. It's not that complicated. You can see Align Technology. We weren't getting a very strong signal in here. You can see that, and so it does retest, but now it's starting to get stronger. I think we did pick up this as a pocket pivot, and there maybe was another one down along the 50-day, but that's a stock that I'm not neither here nor there on. Regeneron is looking like it's trying to turn. I'm not that excited with it, though. Spirit Airlines. This one has actually been pretty choppy, but for those of you who were on the webinars, the last couple of real-time webinars, I was talking about the airlines turning, and it's a very interesting group move that you'll see in all of these stocks. Save is doing the same thing. LVS, I think, is revving up to go higher. You got a pocket pivot here, but it's not going anywhere. Earnings come out not this week, but the week after. I guess that's going to be Wednesday, the 29th. And it's acting well, but not something I want to get into. What I'm looking for, again, and we'll see some examples, and I think you're getting a sense of what I've already talked about. I'm looking for these things when they're real quiet and they're starting to show. I'm not sure why this is doing this, but it is. Notice Boeing. Let me go back. This is building on the airline theme. Boeing is a cousin play. And I remember Bill O'Neill told me he made a lot of money in the airlines, American Airlines, and Boeing was also a big leader at the time, and they were a cousin play. There's also a company making the toilets for the airplanes, and that was a big winner too. I'm trying to remember the name of the company. But in any case, you can see I like this. You see a big volume hit right here, but it closes mid-range, so it gets support along the 10-day. Now you're seeing the force index is flashing blue. Very tight, comes out with earnings next Wednesday. It looked to me like it wants to go higher, and I might look for it to do that after earnings or on earnings. So if you're feeling lucky, maybe you can play that. CA Inc., I don't know. This one, it looks kind of interesting, but I don't really like it. Just kind of going through. Seattle Genetics, choppy biotech, no earnings, but an example of a biotech company with no earnings going higher. Amphenol is a name that you probably haven't seen much in the typical IBD screens, but it's been a strong mover, continuing higher and extended right now, so not really anything I'm looking at. Now here's one last week I picked off, and this was very nice because you're in this tight base, and I think we talked about this as well on the weekly chart. Let me go. If we look at Gilead here, see how tight this thing got? Look at that tightness. I mean, that's so tight it's squeaking. So I see this, okay, and this is where you really kind of put together the weekly chart and the daily chart. And I see this, And then I'm seeing this in here, a little pocket pivot here, a couple little pocket pivots in the base while it's very tight. Usually that means buy this thing now. And in this case, you popped out, got a couple of bucks, you're ahead of the game. They come out with earnings the first week of February. And this looks good. It's even within buying range of the breakout if you're into that. But notice how that's a pretty strong move. But you're starting to see it percolate the day before right here. And you could have just come in and bought it Thursday morning right off the bat. Now Yelp. Okay, I guess I'm going to have to dump this. But you can see Yelp starting to turn blue as it's flashing some pocket pivots here. And this is one I've talked about as it was turning, and it's moving higher. Everything looks good right now. If we go back to notice this one I first got onto Yelp is when it was right in here. You had this pocket pivot, and it was real quiet, pulled into the 10-day. This is back in August. In fact, I think this was the first stock I bought after I got out of the hospital, and at least in big size, and the thing rocketed right away. And you could see how everything flashing blue, but it's doing so right on this day, right as it's getting very, very tight, and everything's starting to flash blue. That is where I'll come in. Since then, it's been a little less coherent, more choppy, but still showing some increasing strength on the bars here at the top of the bongo and the forced index. And it looks okay now, but definitely extended. ALKS, notice how you get a nice move here. So this is getting nice and tight. Not sure where it started to turn blue, but notice how as it was pulling in here, the 13-day force and the weekly bongo was remaining blue. And then you had the breakout on this strong kahuna. A lot of times when you see this dark blue kahuna along with a breakout, it'll move higher. Notice here it picked off the low, the oversold indicator. That's a magic indicator. You can buy anything showing that, right? Wrong. Pharmacyclics just moving higher. NXP semiconductor was actually looking pretty weak in here. I was a little worried about it. Then you saw this pocket pivot. Everything starts to flash blue again, so it looks safe. But it's notice how this name will move up, break down, move up, break down. So it's a little choppy. I avoid it. Not for me. Amgen, notice is right at the base, getting pretty tight. Earnings come out next week. Well, next 2 Tuesdays, so a week from tomorrow, I believe, the 28th. And notice how it's real tight and getting a lot of blue in here now. Looks like it wants to go higher. Abago, this one I was picking up in the base, and this doesn't meet your typical can slim requirements, but notice how it was flashing blue all the way across in this flag, and I thought this was viable in the flag. TD Ameritrade extended. Equifax coming out of a base, extended though, at least from my book. Evercore Partners moving up. It's acting pretty well, but not really something I'm interested in. Notice the defense stocks and not the defensive stocks. You know, not like consumer staples and utilities, which would be defensive stocks. Defense stocks have been acting pretty well lately. Lockheed Martin is one of them. It's very tight going into earnings on Wednesday, I believe, or wait, Thursday, no. But flashing blue all the way. I noticed Raytheon has been doing the same thing. SanDisk, very slow, boring, big name, but it has been moving higher. Notice how you get the big blue kahuna here. Everything's flashing blue. But after this Bible gap, it's very slow, so it's not something I'd be looking at because it's just too boring for me, which means it's probably going to launch on a 30% move now. Qualcomm, surprising name. It's not going to show up on your IBD can slim screens, but it shows up here, and you see the breakout. This actually looks pretty good. Earnings come out next Wednesday, it looks like, and the stock's trying to go higher. Interestingly, let's take a look at on the weekly chart. You can see you got supporting weeks in here. You got a big supporting week in here. Moves up a little more on lighter volume. It's actually acting okay, and it's actually breaking out of a base right here on the weekly. So, this might be actionable. That's going to go on my list. I don't know. Qualcomm's is one of those stocks you can buy 20,000 shares with one click, and it doesn't go anywhere. Somebody has to use this for shorting. Yeah, I'm going to get to that. Wynn Resorts continuing to move higher. Accenture, kind of extended but interesting name. You're going to notice that as I go through this, a lot of the names you're not going to see in IBD. Johnson & Johnson, now it is a pretty boring name, but look at how well it's acting. And you got a pocket pivot here, and it looks like it wants to go higher. Priceline is acting okay going into earnings at the end of February, but this looks to me like it wants to break out. So it almost looks like it's ready to go break out of here. So you can put that on your list, PCLN, Priceline. Proof Point, I've never heard of this name before. This is a new one to me. And notice how everything's starting to flash blue, but that happened back down here. So kind of extended right now. But I got to write this one down and find out what this is all about. PFPT, Proof Point. Never seen that name before. And this is one of the things I like about HGSI is that it will pick up names like this. And by using this chart view, I'm very much able to monitor the stock and see when it's looking good on a technical basis. But it's a new idea. It's a stock that is showing buying, okay, and most likely institutional accumulation. You can see Visa here had a breakout. So I think, you know, that name, Proof Point, is probably worth taking a look at. It's probably a thin name, though. Express Scripts. These are kind of boring old names, so I got to tell you, I'm not getting excited here. Juniper Networks, I've been watching this for a while because I think the whole telecom group is strengthening, and you're seeing that in a number of names. But Juniper, a viable gap up, and it's actually continuing higher. A little wedgy now, but see if it pulls back. But that's acting pretty well. I think they announce earnings, on Wednesday or Thursday. I got to keep. Today's the 20th. For some reason, I keep thinking it's the 21st. Don't ask me why. Pentair. Here's a name that's kind of nondescript. Nobody knows. Not what I really think of when I think of big leaders, but notice how it's acting at a pocket pivot here, and that's turning. You can put that on your list. PNR, Magna International. Yeah, kind of boring. Morgan Stanley, there's a viable gap up, but you can see this was flashing blue a couple, 3 days ago, and it actually started. Everything started changing in here, which is where we first picked it up as a pocket pivot. Medtronic, kind of a big old name. It's been trying to act better, but it's still a bit choppy. Riverbed, anybody remember Riverbed? It's starting to come to life again. If we look at a weekly chart, that's what it looks like. But on the macro level, it's been in a downtrend for a long time. Notice how that it's trying to round and turn here on the weekly chart. So this is kind of interesting. But I don't know, what do the earnings look like? Pretty weak. They're trying to get things turned around, but it doesn't look so exciting here. But interesting that you're seeing a name like Riverbed, and it is a telecom related, I believe. Somebody mentions Proofpoint is an IT security product company. So that it might be similar to FireEye. Are the Bongo and Kahuna indicators leading indicators, or do the blue bars show up after the move? A lot of times they're setting up before. Notice here where Marriott International, before it has a breakout, they're all lining up blue in here. See that? And so they're not. They're. I consider them leading. When I'm seeing this in conjunction with a tight base, that's usually where it's leading me. I remember Riverbed. Some people are talking about it. That was 2010. That thing got moving in like September of 2010. And I remember going on Fox, and I think that was one of the names we were talking about at the time. I remember August, I believe it was my birthday, August 29th in 2010. I was on Fox in New York City, and there was this woman, Barbara, she's from Gabelli Funds, and you see her on TV all the time. She was very bearish. The other person was very bearish. I was actually very bullish, and at the time I liked names like Riverbed. Aruba Networks was another one. I thought things were looking like they wanted to turn. And notice Cisco here, for the first time, is turning all blue across the board. They come out with earnings in February. Now, I think this is starting to look positive for Cisco, and what this leads me to is Finisar, which is a name I've been keeping an eye on. Salix, Extended, Wyndham Worldwide, Hotels, and this is trying to set up again. But there's a group move going on here. And that's why I think you might watch some of these travel stocks, and the airlines are looking good. IBM, still kind of ugly. Let's see where I am on the I'm down towards the end of the list. These are all pretty weak stocks, though, so I'm really not interested in it. So I can basically bag this. Now what I'm going to do is go to my buy list. Now this is the secret buy list that I have, that every stock on this is guaranteed to go higher. But I'm going to run through this, okay? Because you guys want me to. You're mentioning some stocks. And a lot of them, like Tesla, for example, I have on my buy list. So here's Puma. It's been a nice trader, actually. LCI is one I've been watching for a long time. It's not really a fast stock, but I think it's been a strong performer. Ambarella, the stock I hate to love or love to hate, has had a big move, and of course, in this market they run up like this, and then kaboom, everything's gone in a few days. So you're taking profits hopefully on the way up, and this thing had a nice move from around 20, I'm going to say 26 to 36, and that's a good 30-40%. So I think that's something, once you get up to that 30-40% level, you're selling it. Now it's trying to set up again. Earnings come out in March, but there's nothing there right now. Repligen, this is a thin little biotech. I don't really like this because it is thin. I know Les that he got shaken out here, and that's fine. But this move right here, to me, tells me I don't want to be in this thing anyways. It's just too nutty. It's a little thin biotech. Not a lot of institutional sponsorship. Here's Alexion acting well. They come out with earnings next week. Questcor again. A lot of these names you see. Sufun was looking good. This one's extended, though, so I'm not really into it. Illumina, same thing. Micron. MU had a viable gap up. It's a big old chip stock. Some of you might remember this. I remember 95 was one year to have this stock, and it had a huge move in 1995 during what was considered a technology bull market. Of course, just about every bull market since then has been at least partially a technology bull market, because technology has become a larger and larger component of the economy over time. But Micron failed on the viable gap up, and it's kind of looking ugly here. But, big old name, boring. Natus Medical, baby. I like this. I think it's an interesting name. It's very thin, though. Trades 377,000 shares, and the dollar volume is minimal. But you notice you had this viable gap up. Everything turned blue there, and it's been remaining pretty blue on the weekly bongo and the 13-day force index. And this is acting well, but it's extended. Alliance Fiber Optic, you had the pocket pivot. The one thing you're going to notice here is that as it's rounding out, you start with the rounding out here, and it's getting a little tighter. You're starting to see things flash in blue in here, and things are starting to turn more blue as you look at this visually. You can see the pattern of the colors starting to change blue. So I start to actually get interested in this, and you have to anticipate it. And you actually had this move occurred here where you get a little light blue kahuna, but everything's starting to flash blue here and line up. And then it has this bottom fishing pocket pivot. But it's kind of a small name, and so it's going to run into some overhead from the left side. But there is some constructive action here. This one might be worth watching, especially since I'm still bullish on telecom names. Yandex is kind of uneven. This name I've watched, and in here it was getting nice and tight. I actually bought this one, and it moved up a little bit and then kind of faltered the next day, and so I blew out of it. Of course, then it goes up one more day just to piss me off and comes back in. But this one's a little bit, to me, dicey. Celgene. This is one of the three caballeros, as I call them, Biogen and Gilead being the other one. But notice how it's starting to flash very red in here. I don't like that. So this is a name I would avoid, whereas Gilead provides a counterexample, and you could remember seeing that, how that one looked much more constructive. So don't really like the way Celgene is looking going into earnings, I believe, this week. Fleetmatics, this is a stock that's looking doggy. I don't really like it. It's still on my watch list because it's trying to come around. Grand Canyon Education, notice that right off the lows here, it starts to turn, and you're starting to flash blue here. It's very constructive. You get a little pocket pivot type action. I'm not sure if this was a pocket pivot, but this would be enough to bring me into possibly testing a position out off of the, notice how it tests the 65-day exponential. So that's another moving average I use. Solar City, we've been looking at that, still going. Melco, Brocade, here's a little sleeper name that I picked up a little while ago. And you can pivot in here as everything starts to turn blue on Brocade. And it's moving higher, and it's also a telecom stock. So I'm noticing some of these old names coming back. Kihu was always a little bit suspicious to me because you never really saw it turn bright blue across the board. This Bongo Weekly has remained red the whole time. The 13-day force remained red until recently. It's been very choppy. It's having trouble, and it reminds me a little bit of Cena, so I'm not interested in that name right now. Workday, we know all about Workday. eHouse Holdings, this is the Chinese, I don't know, I guess it's the Chinese real estate company, or it's had a move in here. I thought this one was buyable down here when everything started to turn blue, and I put it on my buy list. Never bought it because it wasn't marginable, and I can't deal with stocks that aren't marginable. It screws me up on my buying power. X1 is a piece of garbage. Valiant Pharmaceuticals, we've looked at that. Zeltic Aesthetics. This one's a very choppy one. It got on my radar back here. Very thin, choppy side. I think they do those stomach band operations for people who don't have the discipline to exercise and watch what they eat. But it's had an interesting move. Actavis is still on my buy list. Biogen now is looking good as opposed to, say, Celgene. So of the three caballeros, I think Gilead looks good, Biogen looks good. I would expect Biogen's going to move higher after earnings. Now, Facebook is interesting. So, and again, I want to reaffirm that what I'm looking at now is my watch list. This is my watch list. We went through and we picked up some names that might be new ideas: WX, InventSense, SWKS, Qualcomm, Priceline, BITA, WX. I think I already mentioned those. But those 6 names showed up. There isn't a lot showing up right now, whereas at the end of December there were a lot of stocks showing up. IAC Interactive, Interactive Corp rather, this one has acted well. You know, I actually liked this thing when it was tight in here. Notice everything was flashing very blue. You get a little pullback to the 10-day. A lot of times I'll buy those. You get a nice 3-day trade, and you bail out. Taser looks good here. You're getting a little bit of red here on this pullback, but notice how all this is staying blue. You got the earnings coming out at the end of February. Let's see if it tries to break out, but you had a dry up on the pullback. I think this looks pretty good. It may go sideways for a little while, but I like this. So it's on my list for tomorrow. I'm going to buy 100,000 shares on the opening and push it up $1, so you better get in early. Let's see. InventSense is on my watch list now, so I like it's acting okay. You know, it's not the most beautiful thing on the planet because it's still choppy. You see it on a weekly chart. Let's kind of blow this up. But it is getting, notice these 2 weeks in here on either side of last week, closing up at the peak, so that looks pretty good. The only problem is this might be looked at as a double bottom, but you didn't undercut the first low. So I'm not sure whether we look at this as a big ugly cup, and it's formed a 1-week candle, and now it's trying to break out, or whether it's some sort of bizarre double bottom or some sort of boxy formation. But it is setting up in a cup with handle, so it stays on my watch list. I'd rather buy it on weakness than on strength. So if you have something like this pullback right into the 20-day exponential, that becomes viable, in my view. If you want to step in there and buy some shares, use a tight stop, maybe giving it another % or 2 around the 20-day. Ubiquity Networks, this is a name people have talked about in the chat room, but it's on my watch list, and it's holding the 20-day. A little bit spotty here, so really not what I'm looking for. Valley Technologies I've been watching. Insight, you know, this one's acted pretty well, turned very bright blue in here. In here it's very bright blue as it's holding tight along the 10-day, so even could have potentially been bought right along there. That's kind of what I'm looking at, and they come out and you get a nice move here and stocks up, but not something really to be buying. Synaptics extended. Truly I'm keeping an eye on. It looks like it's trying to round about here. You've got some oversold indicators, so it's definitely oversold. You got huge buying here off the lows. That's constructive. but you got a big base to come up around, and I'm wondering whether this is a big ugly head and shoulders, or if this thing's going to come around, because this is a very deep base, and it's about 50% deep, and it is getting some better action here as it's trying to come up, and I'm just keeping an eye on this because you're noticing things are starting to flash blue in here, and I would like to see it get a little tighter. Earnings come out in early part of February. 3D Systems, notice how it's starting to flash red, so to me looking questionable if you own that. Trinity Industries, I think we talked about this, on this pullback to the 20-day. If you see a stock pulling back to the 20-day or the 10-day, in my view, and you're seeing the Force Index is staying blue and the Bongo staying blue, at least on the weekly as well, the daily, you have that going along with the blue color, that's constructive as well. I think you can buy those sorts of pullbacks. So this is an example of sort of pullback I might look for using this. SunPower had this breakout on Thursday, but I was suspicious of it mainly because of all the red in the pattern. It's not all that strong, not like CSIQ was, which I'll get to, or Solar City. Here's a line, we looked at that already. Generac is breaking down. Notice how everything started to turn red up here after being very nice and blue, changing character. A lot of times that will alert me to something's going to roll over. Acorn, this is still on my watch list. It technically has not violated the 50-day. You closed below here, but you haven't moved below the intraday low of this day. So you technically have not violated. You're sitting right on top of the 65-day exponential. But notice everything's turning red. That looks like it wants to roll. Regeneron, everything turning blue. Earnings coming out in middle of February. Maybe it's going to try to go higher from here. I don't know. Might be worth a whack. But to me, not a high probability play. WebMed. This is one I should have bought, very nice and tight. This is a great example of what I'm looking for because I saw this thing when it was right here around 39, and it's going real tight right along the 10-day and the 20-day, and then everything starts turning blue right here. So as soon as that happens, I should have been on this thing, and I should have bought some shares, which I didn't because it's had a great move since then, well over 20%, and I just missed a bit, like we like to say, you can't kiss all the babies. And I do think it does provide a great example, though, of the type of action I'm looking for. Las Vegas Sands, this got real strong in here. Turning blue. Notice how everything turns blue in here when it gets real tight. And you can kind of put it together, the action you're looking for. Volume drawing up, holding tight, nice tight flag formation. And then it pops out. Precision cast parts, notice here is starting to all turn blue right here, and I think that wasn't even a pocket pivot, but when I see this, sometimes that's good enough. It's slow name, but it's also, I think, a play on the whole airline mover, the movement in the airline stocks. TripAdvisor, I'm watching this, not really too exciting here, so I'm not really buying it. It doesn't really have all the components I'm looking for just yet. I'll get to more questions in a second. Somebody asked, how fast do you normally go through your candidate chart? And NPS Pharmaceuticals, this is on my list for tomorrow morning to keep an eye on. And to me, it looks like it wants to come off of the 10-day here. Very strong upside move. You had a big shakeout, and you're breaking out of this cup. You're right on top of the cup. To me, this thing looks like it wants to go higher, and I'll have to look at this to see if it's marginal. But that's on my list for tomorrow as a possible. You buy it here, and then if it hangs out, hopefully, and it'll pop out in a few days. A lot of times, if I see something like this, I'll give it a time stop as well as a price stop. So, I wrote on my other website, I wrote about Gilead on Wednesday of last week, and if we go back to Gilead, come on now, what's going on? Right in here, if I was going to, I wrote that if you bought it in here, you would do so with the expectation that it's going to come out within a couple, 3-4 days. I'm usually looking for these to come out quickly when I see everything lining up. So Seattle Genetics has been one on my watch list for a long time. It actually started out as a short. Gilead, there's Gilead. Yelp. Sienna is dogging us. I'm watching this because it's a cousin stock, or more like a brother stock to Finisar. But one of the problems with Sienna is it's shown a lot of red. So to me, it's not really the one to be in. We'll get to Finisar down the line. Northrop Grumman. Now here's another defense stock that's been acting well. Very slow. And I asked myself, why are all these defense stocks doing so well when they talk about Obama's de-emphasizing the military and whatnot? I wonder if this is something like what we saw in 2001, in the summer of 2001. I noticed stocks like Lockheed and other defense stocks were moving higher in basing. Alkermes, boring. Celdex. This is one that's a roundabout. It's trying to come around, and I picked it up right here, and you get a little bit of a pocket pivot type move up in here. This one's trying to roundabout, and I think it needs to be watched. Earnings come out in March, but I'm not going to buy it up here. Should have bought it down in here. Now here's Finisar. Notice Finisar is starting to turn red in here, which I don't like to see. But I'm waiting to see if it comes in and tests the 50-day moving average, because if you look at it on a weekly chart, what you're going to notice is it's been coming up the last 6 out of 7 weeks. It's been moving higher, and it's forming this cup, so I figure it's got to pull back a little bit and form a handle, and then see how that occurs. I'd want to see what this looks like after it's pulled back maybe a little bit more, but volume isn't real heavy. So it may hold in tight in here, just pull back, start to form a handle. But you're starting to see all of these turn red, so I'm a little concerned about it, but that's the reason why I wouldn't be buying it now. It needs to pull back and set up and tighten up. Jinko Solar, someone's asking about that. Now notice this is all flashing blue. The pullback here, you got heavy volume on this. Earnings don't come out until April, but it looks like it's trying to hold the 10-day. So you might watch this one. This is, broke out from a cup formation, pulling back, but it's not as powerful as other solar stocks. Here's NXP we already talked about. Here's Love. You had a pocket pivot in here. You also had pocket pivots in here along, and see how this started to turn blue in here. This looked constructed to me right in here, and I think this is probably positive for some of the other follow-on groups like GoGo and ENT, for example. Blue Core is a name I've been watching. Notice how it was setting up, but it didn't work. So let's say I had looking at this, I had bought it. I would have given it a few days, maybe 2 or 3, and then just blown out of it because it wasn't going anywhere. HomeAway is trying to get going again. You had the Bible gap up here, flipped out, and it's been setting up. But notice how you have it set up in here. It gets nice and tight along the 10-day, and then right on this day you start to turn pretty blue. But you were remaining pretty blue in here, so even if I saw this little bit of red, it wouldn't freak me out. I'd look at this as constructed like it wants to go higher. And in fact, this was on my watch list for a move on this particular day. Nuvasive, people ask about this one a lot. It's trying to gap out of here, like a Bible gap up, pulling in. This might be Bible, and it does give you minimal risk here because the low of this day is 36.35, and you closed at 36.71, so you're pretty close to it. You could try buying this. Notice how it does stall out, though, but trying to come out of a new base. Earnings don't come out till March, so that's an interesting name. You could put that on your watch list for tomorrow, NUVA. As a possible buy. Yahoo, just kind of fluttering around. Chicago Bridge and Iron, I think, looks like it wants to go. Notice how everything's flashing blue. It's very tight. I'd be a buyer of this right here with the idea that it's coming out soon. So that's another one you can put on your list for tomorrow. Flowserve, just kind of a slow name, not really doing anything. I'm not really that excited about it. Pandora Media, extended, but notice how everything started to flash blue in this Bible gap up, and it's continued higher. Now, it's Canadian Solar. See, this is where I noticed a tightness in here. See this? As I'm watching this form, and it's a little bit different than it's been, say, here. It's had some time. By the time it gets to the end of December, very tight. I wrote about this thing, I think, on this day or this day, and it pops out here on a big breakout where everything's flashing blue. But notice how it got very tight in here. The 13-day and the 2-day force index turned blue. The bongo had remained blue the whole time, which I think when you see a stock forming a base and the weekly bongo stays blue, that tends to be very constructive. And then notice you get the pullback where where you see a little bit of red here, but the 13-day number and the Bongo Weekly stay blue, and so this pocket pivot out. There's Lockheed. Notice how blue that thing has been. SanDisk, boring. It's the index. Wind Resorts continues higher. LifeLock. Notice LifeLock right in here before you had a pocket pivot right here. I think this was a pocket pivot, but it coincided with all this turning blue. That looked very good. It's extended now. So you can see so far I've got a few names I'm going to be watching tomorrow morning. Priceline again, I'd be watching this. This looks like it wants to pop out of there. I'm not sure if it's going to do it before earnings. I'm going to pull up some other names. ISIS. LinkedIn, not really a fan of LinkedIn. I think this pocket pivot here, if you look at this, you're actually declining upside volume, so it's wedging, and then it has a pocket pivot. It doesn't work. Baidu, not looking good. M-Chip, Pasira is hanging in there. That looks kind of interesting. I'd give it more time, though, but keep an eye on that one. Ecolab, nothing really happening there. Notice how this is going sideways. You're not really getting any clear pattern here. It looks fairly incoherent. Morgan Stanley, Bible gap up using the low of the day there. Polaris. Yeah, this webinar is going to go probably another 20 minutes or so. So it's not our usual 1 hour thing. I was hoping to give a thorough review. Under Armour, Charles Schwab. These are all acting well, but nothing really. Just names I'm watching. Guidewire. I saw this. I like this in here. Everything's starting blue. It's a little incoherent though. It's trying to break out, but not really in the Bible position. We have some names already that we're looking at for tomorrow. Tractor Supply, not really looking all that great to me. Poly One, I don't know why I've been watching that one. VFC, this is acting pretty well. Notice how it's breaking down, but notice how you start to see it show a lot of red relative to how it looked before, and it kind of warns you ahead of time. So I want to get through these. Groupon's another one I've been watching. Maybe it builds a handle, but it's had a nice move here. Notice everything lines up blue. You get this deep doo-doo type of pocket pivot move. We're right here, I think. Netflix was starting to look pretty grim a while ago. Notice how you ran all the way up and then everything starts flashing red as you're running along the 20-day. That was a sell signal in my view. Tesla, whoops, back it up. Everybody's always interested in Tesla. Now Tesla is interesting because you did get a breakout here and everything is starting to turn blue. I'd like to see the Bongo Weekly turn blue, but it didn't do it this week. Stock's holding tight, volume's drying up, earnings come out in the middle of February. Is the stock headed higher? That's a good question. But it's definitely something I'm watching if you were going to try and buy it and play this. But the other thing is it might be a low, a cup with handle breakout with a low handle. But I would also point out that I've seen cups with low handles where the breakout from the low handle is a big pocket pivot on huge volume. And that alone will trigger a big upside move. So I think Tesla might still be viable on a pullback. If you got to pull back to 160, I don't know, maybe one of their cars catches on fire over the weekend and drive a little viable pullback. But I'd watch it maybe coming into the 10-day. You still got a lot of time before earnings come out, so it looks interesting. Proto Labs, it's the only 3D stock that didn't get whacked the other day. I think this one is setting up. I like this. It's on my watch list. Earnings come out in the middle of February, and notice how you pull back a little bit here. You hold the 50-day moving average. It's trying to round out, and this one is on my watch list for tomorrow, so you want to put that on. If you bought this, you would expect it to hold the 50-day moving average or at least a 10-day on any pullback. But you see how this is turning? That catches my eye. Now I'd love to see this turn blue, but it doesn't necessarily have to. But it's starting to look a little bit better. These are other names I've been watching. Nothing really too exciting. Comcast has been kind of a sleeper name. It's been very slow. You got a pocket pivot here, but notice how it's got a nice blue, everything turning blue in here as you break out, and it's moved higher ever since. So it's actually acted pretty well. Big boring name, just like IACI, Interactive Corp. Goldman Sachs, it was acting well. Yeah, I like Morgan Stanley and Schwab. Those are my favorites among the financials. Now notice when you have this pocket pivot here, okay? I mean this is the perfect setup when you see this. You got a pocket pivot here. It's in the base. It hangs out for 2 days. Volume dries up, but everything's still holding blue. You just buy the crap out of it. Pardon my French, but you just buy it. And then, you got a nice move. You could have sat through this pullback. Usually with Splunk especially, sell into that and then hang back and buy it on a pocket pivot, pull back to the 10-day. That's pretty typical for Splunk. Cubist Pharmaceuticals, you notice everything was starting to turn blue in here. It was tight along the 10-day. This is actually on my list of stocks to buy on this day right here because of the tight action and everything turning blue. But you get a sense of what I'm looking for. On this Netcan, I guess it's now NQ Mobile. I think Muddy Waters has a great racket going on. They get short stocks and they put out these reports and accuse companies of being frauds. And with a Chinese stock where people have seen these companies get whacked, people get scared out very quickly. You have to excuse me, my daughter is texting me. She always picks the greatest times to text me. But anyways, you'll notice this on this pocket pivot here, this is a bottom fishing pocket pivot. And you come up through the 50-day and the 200-day. That's actually a pocket pivot, and you could, nice and tight, and you could buy it. It's all turning blue here, but notice now the weekly bongo has turned blue. You had a viable gap up. Stock's pulling in very tight. Volume is drying up here. Maybe it spends another day, but I would be looking for this thing to come out of this pretty quickly here and moving higher. I know a lot of people went short this name because of the talk about it being a fraud company, but I just don't think that's the case. A lot of hedge funds have come in to take bigger positions or take positions in the stock. They have deals with Sprint, which just announced a deal on Wednesday where they're going to provide their software to the, I guess, in the U.S. and whatnot. You can read about that. Don't worry, I'm getting to some of these other names. Time Warner Cable. That's potentially going to be bought up by Charter, and I think the earnings also come out next week. But to me, I would put this down on your list. I think you just buy some shares of this and hang out, and it's going to get bought out and probably 150. But it's definitely showing you strength in here, and it's a very nice tight pattern. I mean, the one risk is that they don't get bought out and the stock drops, so keep that one in mind. Nothing going on. CMG, notice, was starting to look pretty well, pretty nice, and it's not really going anywhere. Herbalife got whacked the other day. Not looking good. This sort of gap down I don't think is something to be holding in. I was keeping an eye on it, but there's nothing exciting there. Lionsgate is another leading stock. I've been watching to see, it's a leading stock that's been correcting for a while. I've been waiting to see if maybe you get a roundabout, but it started to look like it was going to here, but it really needs more time to round out and get tight, and it's starting to break down, so that looks like it's going down the toilet. Stratasys is another one that's broken down, and I don't really think you want to be here. U.S. Silica Holdings, I've been waiting to see if this thing rounds out a base. It's really just breaking down, and it violated the 50-day in here, and it's violated again. Trying to round up, but I don't really like the way this is acting. Lumber Liquidators, I do keep an eye on this one. I can't tell you if it's a short or a long yet, but that Whitney, what's his name, who was short Netflix all the way up back in 2010, 2011, announced he was shorted, I guess, here, and the stock broke down, and it's been getting whacked. But I'm kind of keeping an eye on it. So some of these I'm just watching. I'm not necessarily. Here's Amazon. I think Amazon's one to put on your watch list. Has had a pocket pivot on Friday. You see that right here. Everything's turning blue here. This is still not the Bonga Daily, but it tends to lag. But it looks like a wire. And the other thing to keep in mind, you might remember we were talking about Gilead. And notice, look at how tight this thing is holding along here. You support at the 10-week. It looks to me like it wants to go higher. And these guys are going to announce big earnings increases. Next quarter here, 238% is the expected earnings increase, 71 cents. The quarter after that, 190 for almost 200%. So you're seeing the earnings in Amazon coming through, and if they can beat these numbers, I think this thing's going to break out. You could wait and see if you get a Bible gap up or whatever, but it looks pretty good to me. It looks like it wants to go higher. Salesforce, this one I thought was a buy in here, right? In fact, I'd put it on my list to buy on this day, and of course it goes out the next day, but I was busy with something else, and it's gone higher. But an example of where I would look for things to start turning. I like tightness and volume drawing up along moving averages like the 10, the 20, or the 50-day. Apple is looking pretty doggy. I'm not almost looking like it might become a short again. Michael Kors, this is actually on my short list now. I don't know what it's doing here on my buy list, but it's looking pretty grim. But you can see that after this breakdown here, it started to change character in a big way. Sinclair Broadcasting was looking like it wanted to break out and then failed. And notice it got a lot of red showing up in here before it went through the 50-day. But I think overall, I hope you're getting an idea of what I'm looking for. I don't know, did iRobot come up? Yeah, this one's kind of cheesy. It's not really setting up properly. A little too loose for me. This WBAI, you can see when it pulled back in here. And I would have bought this one, but it's not marginable, at least where I trade. And you had a pullback, holds a 20-day moving average, and then everything is turning blue here. This sort of stock, this is pretty typical. These smaller names that are hot will turn up off the 20-day, and when they come up to the 10-day boom, they're off and running. CUDA is another one that's a little bit crazy. There's more of a buy down there. FireEye. FireEye obviously caught my eye on this breakout and then holding very tight. And I wrote about this one back in here and thought that if it traded to 42 or better on a pullback, you could buy the shares. I know people who did it, did exactly that. And then the Bible gap up, which also was viable around 50 bucks, has gone bonkers to the upside. But you can see how it was showing me some of this in here as it was getting tight, and even holding tight in here coming out of this base. There's another one like this, Fonars, a little bit too thin and crazy. Gigamon I'm keeping an eye on. You can see it's starting to try and round about. You had, I'm not sure if this was a pocket pivot, not yesterday, but Thursday, and that's trying to act much better. I think it's one to keep an eye on. Earnings come out in early first week of February. Global Eagle I think looks very good here, flashing bright blue. You had the pocket pivot down here and a flag breakout here. I think this thing wants to go higher. It doesn't seem to want to sell off, so we'll see what happens next week. But I already own this thing. Now GoGo I'm keeping an eye on because I think it may be trying to start to round out. Earnings come out in the second week of February. It's starting to show some signs of life. And there is overhead here, so when it moves up over the next couple of days, it might run into, if it moves up over the next couple of days, it might run into some selling. But you can see everything turned red in here, and it's been a little bit doggy since then, but it may be setting up, so one to keep an eye on. High Crush Partners, this is a Silica cousin stock, nothing really going on there. Intercloud, those of you who are on the chat room, I thought this thing was viable right here on this day when it was under 15 and it ran up to 18. In fact, I think on the chat room I said buy here, and then on this day I said this is where you want to sell it because it came up to the top, but that's a nice 20% trade right there. And notice how it comes in, the volume is drawing up in the extreme. Look at that volume drawing up. And then it turns back to the upside as everything's turning blue. Now this stock I originally talked about down in here, I believe when it was around $9. I think on this pullback in here because everything was blue. These were remaining fairly blue in here, and you're drawing up on the pullback along the 10-day. Intrexon is going bonkers, but you can see Intrexon made the turn here. And to me, this was the entry point. It wasn't a pocket pivot, but it was, you know, I guess I should give this a name, like a blue turn or something, or a Smurf turn or something, or when a stock goes Smurfy. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. But in any case, you notice that it all turned right there. Boom. You had the bottom here and the turn right here. Boom. And this thing goes and turns to the upside. Now it's just going nuts. So at this point, you're just waiting for the next base to form. Organovo, I think, is acting okay. Light volume pullback to the 10-day. It could pull back to the 20-day. That's a possibility. But it's hanging in there. Everything's pretty much blue. I think it's eventually going to break out. Earnings come out. When do earnings come out? No, they don't tell you when earnings are coming out. I'll have to check that, but someone might want to look at that. Rocket Fuel, okay, this is going to be the next fire eye, so everybody run out and buy it. But notice this thing had a breakout, and it's starting, overall though, it's starting to look better in here. Notice you get nice and blue here, but this is looking pretty good on the breakout. I think the pullback is viable. They're going to have big earnings over the next couple of years, and right now they're not making money, they're losing money. So you can see that the idea that I'm talking about, that the market is much more forward-looking. If you look at their estimates for fuel, and you got to love the symbol, fuel, rocket fuel. I mean, these guys make software that helps companies track or plan for online advertising. But if you look at the forward estimates on this thing, they're looking to make, and I saved this stock just for this webinar because this is my special idea. I haven't talked about it too much. But they're looking for 40 cents in 2015 and turning to $2.95 by 2017. It reminds me a lot like a lot of Workday and FireEye. So these are companies, they're software companies in a hot area, and they're very forward-looking, and you're seeing pretty decent sponsorship coming into this. So if this thing pulled back a little closer, like into 63, well, which it did on Friday, it's kind of thin, trades 350-something thousand, but it barely meets my minimum. But I like this name, and I'm looking to buy it. It's marginable, but it has a 100% maintenance requirement, which basically overnight makes it non-marginable. But I think this one may be setting up for a move. Earnings come out in February. I think gold is turning, and this is hitting my radar here. Notice you get the bottoming signals in here, the oversold indicators. It's starting to turn. Everything's turning blue. You had a couple days of downside. Gold is trying to turn to the upside here, and this is interesting. Sprouts, I thought, was a potential roundabout, but it's getting a little too loose in here, so I bought. Sungi Mobile, Gomo. Almost sounds like Gilmo, but in any case, you had a nice pocket pivot breakout here on Friday. Pulling in, you might try buying this one. It's a thin stock. Trades 692,000 shares a day. Not terribly thin, but that's a pretty strong move to the upside. You get these stocks tend to do this. It may pull back in. Twitter is setting up. Notice how it's starting to turn blue, but it may be a little premature. It may need more time, and it may need the earnings announcement, but you can see how it's starting to turn. VIP shops, every time it's gotten tight, notice how it gets tight in here, and you could have bought it in here. I think there was a little pocket pivot right here. Pulls back a little bit. This sort of volatility is typical for the stock. And remember, when you're looking at stocks, think about their character. If you watch them, I watch a lot of stocks. I look at a lot of charts, so I get acquainted with them. Not that they become friends or anything, but I get to know them pretty well in terms of their characteristics, and we know VIPS is a very volatile stock. Why? Now this is classic, okay? This has been one of my better stocks this year in terms of the move. You notice Cena has not done so hot. Kihi's been a little bit uneven. But this was very tight, and we're going to look at the weekly chart. Again, when you can put this all together on the weekly chart and the daily chart, I think that's where you got something. So, stocks I'm looking at that are very tight on the weekly chart, like Amazon looks pretty tight on the weekly chart. Notice here, why? Look at how tight that thing was. After it's chopping back and forth, it gets very tight, and that's coinciding with this right along here on the daily chart. And as soon as this thing starts to turn blue, you got a pocket pivot, couple days, and I'm buying this stock. I think this is one name I actually held over New Year's Day. and just bought a pile of it here, and then it shot out of here. And of course, sold it too soon. But the fact that I take big positions compensates for the fact that I don't necessarily catch the whole move. And that's why I prefer to operate in this market. If you had a smaller position, you might still be holding it because there's never really a reason to unload it. Anyways, let's look at some of the names. Well, I want to look at something. Okay, how can you do this yourself? If you can't afford $600 a year, or whatever HCSI costs, I like stockcharts.com. I think this is a great service. It's cheap. I think it's $120 a year or something like that. And this can get you where you need to go. If you look at, if you're paying for the regular service and you do standard scans, okay, whoops, I'm sorry, predefined scanner. This you don't even have any work you have to do. And these are bullish indicators, new 52-week highs, strong volume gainers. So let's click on this. And it's going to bring up names here, okay? And I think these screens are real time, so you'll pick them up in real time. But you know, you can look at these. What you do here is notice this is a 3-cent stock. Well, less than actually, wait a minute, that's a 0.3 of a penny stock. So you want to sort them by price, so you get the biggest prices up on top. But you can actually go through and you can pick up names that are moving on volume during the day. And of course, these become part of your watch list. And then you can pull up a chart. You got to go back. Rentrack. What's Rentrack up to these days? Look at that thing popping out of there. And you can do this on stockcharts.com, and they do update their charts in real time. And I believe the screens also update in real time. And you've got several here that you could play with if you go back. Bullish MACD crossovers, if you're into that kind of stuff. You know, that's stuff that I'll look at. But again, you want to sort by price, PXD. Let's see what Pioneer Natural Resources is doing. Possibly a roundabout, but not really that exciting. But anyways, you can use this as a way to monitor your names. And then what you can do from here is you go to the Sharp Charts workbench, and I keep chart lists. So I got 85 index. So let's just go. Here's my buy list. So I can pop through my my buy list this way. So Apple shows up, and I can scan through my charts this way. ABBV, it's looking doggy. ACAD. So see how I'm able to scan through my watch list in real time, and these will be updating during the day. So I can just pop through this very quickly, and I'm doing the same thing I'm doing on HGS Investor. The only difference is I don't have the indicators. But if you want to monitor what stocks are doing and where they are in their chart patterns, then you've got this works very well. And I highly recommend it for those of you who are on a tight budget, or you only have a $5,000 account. FinViz is another one. I think you should always have this website up. It's always got top gainers, but you can always, unusual volume, you can click on that, and it'll give you a bunch of charts like that of stocks showing unusual volume, and you can just fly through these and find names in real time. And if you have something like HGS Investor in real time, you can use this to find these names, jot them down, and then that night when you download and update your data on HCSI, you can go through them. Or if you're using MarketSmith, that works too. You can keep lists there. But these are great ways to find names intraday. Okay. Yes, this is going to be on YouTube. I'm actually recording it right now. So, but this is how you keep up with the market. And you can use these. These are my two favorite tools. I personally think I could run money, just trade my own account using these along with eSignal, which you can also use to track stocks in real time on their daily charts. And you guys have seen me do that on the webinars. But this basically, how it's done. And it's not rocket science, and I think if you do this, and this is also an exercise I think you should do every day, and you should spend at least 20 minutes, half an hour every night going through your charts, and I think you should be excited about it, first of all, because if the idea of looking for stocks, being on a stock hunt, which is a treasure hunt as far as I'm concerned, because you never know when you're going to find something, like a Tesla, way back at the very beginning. But why was Tesla hitting my radar? Mainly because on this initial gap up, turning blue, very tight in here. See on the pullback, very tight in here. It's in the 40s. and everything turning blue. And so this is just flashing so blue, I guess, on my HGSI that you had to buy it. And then of course when you get this move, you can see that this thing goes bonkers from there. But notice how as you're forming you're in the flag formation as you pull into the 10-day, and you're coming into the 20-day, and you see everything's remaining pretty blue. You know that it's setting up to probably go higher. If we look at Solar City back then as well, you guys know I was hot on that around 19 bucks. But same thing. See how it's very tight in here, and everything turns very blue. And I, conceptually, I'm thinking Tesla, Solar City is run by Elon Musk, and Solar City is doing things a little bit differently in the solar space. And so, we also had the other theme of subsidy stocks back then, for those of you who are in the chat room. And I would suggest everybody, if you get a chance, at least who's on this webinar and listening to this, to go on to the chat room. I usually show up anytime between, say, 8 a.m. Pacific to 10 a.m. Pacific. And it varies, but I generally go on there once a day at least. Sometimes not if I'm too busy, but I'll be talking about some of these ideas. And I did talk about, I'm sorry, I'm looking at iCloud. iCloud I did talk about right in here, and I was seeing certain indicators in here that were telling me this thing was hot to trot. And of course on VOSI we picked up the pocket pivot move here, which is very profitable very quickly. So let's see, what other... Hopefully this is helping people. That's good. Yeah, I see someone saying, excellent seminar. I figured out a lot about HGSI from today as well. Some people say, in other words, you don't necessarily wait for a pocket pivot to buy when everything turns blue. Exactly. If I'm seeing the tightness in the pattern and I'm seeing certain things. So, for example, this thing coming around, this is a huge move. And if you understood this company, I thought it was a very interesting story at the time. And you're getting this... volume dry up on these pullbacks. So you're seeing this repeated pattern, upside move, thin stock though. So it's going to have one day of upside and then it's going to come in, and another day of upside and it's going to come in. And every time it does that, one, two, third time it's drying up in here, and after that, boom, it takes off. And then you get this pullback in here, which to me looked very normal. And I'm just watching the volume drying up on the pullback, and everything's still remaining blue, and it starts to come out. To me, this is a trade. I think this stock, though, may have some longer-term value, but I think it's going to have to form a base. And the earnings come out. They don't come out till April. But, coming back into the 10-day, now I'm looking at possibly buying it back. Any IPO screen. They're actually, I love the list that they have on here. Let's go. Let's see. HGS, Smart Groups. See, I'm looking around HGSI starters, popular stock categories, new issues. You guys want to pop through some new issues? Yes or no? I'll do it in about 10 minutes and then we can wrap this up. Here's WBAI. In fact, this is probably the first place I found it. But remember, what you want to do here is you want to go here and rank them by ERG. Notice how most of these, though, are babies and they don't have any ratings just yet. So I guess we're not going to be able to do that. But just running down the list, is there anything here that catches my eye? You can look at these combo rankings. Sometimes that. Let's check this out. Avianca. Whoa, kind of missed that one, didn't we? But yeah, they have all sorts of lists that you can look at. Optional, preferred, small cap, warrants. For those of you who like to trade optionable stocks. 52-week high retracement, new 52-week high. There's all sorts of demand, short-term, SG-style growth stocks. Here's just pop through these real quick. Notice Air Lease. And this is what I'm talking about. This one's starting. In fact, this is the second time I've seen this one pop up. But notice everything turning blue here. It's trying to round out. It might be similar to what's going on with. The airlines are related to all that. Here's China Lodging, this HTHT. He had a big pocket pivot on Friday, but this one was flashing in here, how it got real tight in here. See that? And then you pop out. So that you can go through these lists, and it's all there for you. So there's the famous Windows fade out now. DaVita Healthcare, just this is demand short term, so it's showing you stocks that are showing strong demand short term. And it's all there, so you can, if you're a chart junkie like me, I can spend all day going through this stuff, and I just get very excited about it. And I think the way to gauge whether you're fit to run money or to be a trader, if this doesn't get you excited, if it doesn't get your blood boiling, then you're probably never going to get that good at it. So you have to really have passion for it. I'm going to answer some questions. Does HGSI provide any sponsorship numbers? No, they don't actually. But there's other places you can get that. You can go on to Yahoo Finance, and they'll show you sponsors. Bloomberg, but that's an $18,000 a year service. I use that. They have updated sponsorship numbers and show you where all the 13 Ds are being filed and everything. You can use a basic sponsorship on Market Smith. Also, Wanda has good data, but there's sources where that comes from that you can get and subscribe to. I would just go online and search on institutional sponsorship, institutional ownership, stuff like that. You'll find some services that you can subscribe to, I believe. Don't quote me on that, though, because I have what I have. I think Bloomberg is the best because it updates more frequently. They also do a pretty good job with short interest as well, and those are other things that you want to monitor. The NASDAQ website is great for monitoring short interest. So anyways, I think that's all I have. Any last questions before I depart? It is 11:38 my time, so we're approaching lunch, and I can hear my stomach. Shorting. Thank you. Let's go through my short list real quickly and see what's shaking there. Gizme short. Why does it say Gizme? Gill Stock Market Ideas, GSMI. I kind of got that from O'Neill. His institutional recommendation service was called New Stock Market Ideas, NSMI. We call it NISME. Here's Fleet. For those of you who are on the webinars, the live webinars, I think a couple of Fridays ago, I mentioned this could potentially be a late-stage failed base. You could short it using the 50-day as your stop, and sure enough, that thing has gone lower. GameStop, if you're on the chat room, you guys know I've been trading this thing on the downside. And, I saw this, okay, and notice how it's flashing red. You hit the 200-day, and I actually put on my list to short this the next day. Of course, the next day it gaps down several points, and I'm a little bit late to the party. Watching Green Mountain here, it's starting to roll over here. I'm not sure if this is going to turn into a new base, because if you look at it on a weekly, it's trying to come around, and the volume figures look pretty good, so I'm not really sure about this one as a short. That's an index. The other thing is this will, in your list, this will give you, HSI will give you an index of your list, whatever it is, your buy list or your short list, whatever. LinkedIn, to me, is still a short candidate, kind of watching this. I don't think anything's going to happen until earnings. Lulu, has been a short for a long time. Notice how when you started coming around, we had initially looked at it on this gap down, if you recall, because you were coming off of the big head and the right shoulder. We thought maybe this is the break, but of course it turns around and goes higher, stops you out. But notice how when it starts to weaken again and roll over, and this will happen with a lot of shorts, the right shoulder will make a marginal new high, and so that sucks everybody back in, and then it starts to roll over. But notice how it's rolling over. It comes down again, and on the chat room we're talking about it in here, along with, well, then it broke down completely, but also with Mercado Libre is another one I'm keeping an eye on. Michael Kors, to me, is starting to break down. We looked at it last week. I thought it could have been shortable on the rally back to the 50-day, using the 50-day as a moving as a stop. And, of course, you're using the 50-day as a moving average, but also as your stop. And it breaks down. I think Michael Kors may be topping. See what it does after earnings. NSM has just been an ugly stock, continued to break down. Is a new one I'm keeping an eye on. It's a big cup base. It's trying to make a comeback, but it's looking like it wants to head lower. Earnings come out at the end of February. Notice everything's flashing red here. I thought it was shortable in this rally back into the 50-day, and it looks like it's starting to break down. OCN, if those of you who are on the chat room watching this one, and I actually told you guys it was a short like a day or two before it blew apart, And the reason is because you're seeing this big red kahuna is negative in this consolidation, which to me you're looking at a pinhead, right shoulder, and then everything's turning red in here. And on this day I got short stuck. You had a break. As always, though, I get out too soon, cover too soon, and the stock heads to the 200-day. But still a nice profit on that for one day if you're getting short and using this to tell you when it's weak. I don't really see a lot of things. CNET coming down hard, looking like a dog here, but you can see this started to get pretty red right in here. So once it gaps down, it could have been shorted there if you can borrow it. But you can also see how truly, okay, this is one I'm on the fence on. I'm just watching it. It's on my short list and my long list. See what goes on. But it's starting to show some signs of positive action. Not sure where it's going, but just something I'm watching. Urban Outfitters is a dog. Coming to the 50-day, you can see everything turn red. One rally up into the 50-day, another one on Friday. It's probably heading lower. But you can also use this for your short list. So anyways, somebody says, do you create a new idea list each day? Yeah, I do, of things that are actionable. Do you continue to use market orders? Yeah, I do. Let's see what else. HTS Investor is... highgrowthstock.com, and that's where you can go to check it out. So I don't know, did I just produce a huge advertisement for them? My view is if something makes me money and I'm using it profitably and successfully, then I think it's got to be working. It's also a great value. And you know, in terms of looking at things in real time, there are a lot of places that you can look at things in real time to work along with HGSI. And I think that's a good way to go for people who are on a limited budget. I know Market Smith costs $1,000 a year. For a lot of people, that's not a lot if you have a big account. But if you're starting out with 5 or 10 grand, that's a lot of money. That's 10% of your account. And I think looking for low-cost ways of tracking the market and keeping track of ideas is helpful to everybody. And having options. So anyways, that's all I've got. If you got any more questions about this, you know where to email us, and we'll answer any questions as soon as we can. Other than that, thanks for showing up today, you guys, on the day off, and enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see what happens tomorrow with some of these stocks that we highlighted as potential buys tomorrow morning. Okay?